Overthinking isn't just a personality trait. It's usually an attempt to control uncertainty and protect identity. And once you start seeing that pattern clearly, the mental loops many people live in every day begin to make a lot more sense. Hi, my name is Malcolm Lilienthal. I'm a mental health therapist, a coach, and the creator of the Titan Blueprint framework, which is designed to help people master their thoughts, emotions, and identity so they can live with clarity, discipline, and purpose. On this channel, we explore the deeper forces that shape human behavior, from psychology to personal development to philosophy to leadership and biblical wisdom. The goal is to understand why we think the way we think, why we react the way we react, and why those patterns shape the direction of our lives. The mission here is simple: to help you recognize the patterns that may be quietly controlling your life, reclaim your authority over your mind, and develop the kind of sense of resilience that allows you to face life's challenges without losing who you are. So let's start here. Overthinking is one of the most common mental patterns people struggle with. You replay conversations in your head. You replay conversations in your mind. You analyze decisions long after you've made them. You imagine multiple possible outcomes before something even happens. And even when you know the thinking isn't helpful, your mind keeps returning to the same loop. So for many people, this becomes exhausting. They lie awake at night reviewing all the scenarios, they second guess their choices, and they mentally rehearse conversations that may never occur. And now when people describe themselves as overthinkers, they often assume it's simply part of their personality. I've just always been this way. But psychologically, overthinking usually has a deeper purpose. It's an attempt to create certainty in situations that feel unpredictable. Does that make sense? The human brain is designed to reduce uncertainty. So from a survival perspective, unpredictability historically meant danger. Does that make sense? So the mind tries to anticipate possible outcomes in order to prepare. And in small amounts, this is incredibly useful, right? It helps us plan, it helps us problem solve, it helps us avoid obvious mistakes. But overthinking begins when the mind tries to solve problems that cannot actually be solved yet. So the brain begins cycling through possibilities endlessly. What if this happens? What if they misunderstand me? What if I made the wrong decision? And beneath those questions is usually something deeper, a fear that something important about the self could be threatened. So you might be thinking, but Malcolm, I'm just trying to make the best decision possible. And that's often true. But many overthinking patterns aren't just about decisions. They're about identity protection. So for example, if someone's identity is tied closely to competence, they overanalyze decisions because the possibility of making a mistake feels threatening. Or if someone's identity is tied to approval, they may replay conversations repeatedly trying to make sure they didn't say something that could be damaging, right? Or damage how others perceive them. If someone's identity is tied to control, uncertainty itself can feel deeply uncomfortable. Think people who need an itinerary. So there's nothing wrong with itineraries, but you can't be spontaneous with an itinerary, right? So the mind attempts to control the future through analyzing or analysis. But here's the paradox. The more the mind tries to control uncertainty through thinking, the more uncertainty it often discovers, right? So every possible solution produces another hypothetical scenario, and then that loop continues. And this is what psychologists call rumination, repetitive thinking that attempts to solve emotional discomfort rather than practical problems. Now, here's where this intersects with faith. Many thoughtful Christians struggle with overthinking because it's like they carry strong senses of responsibility, okay? Like they want to make wise decisions, they want to live with integrity, They want to honor God with their lives. Like those are admirable, right? Admirable desires. But when responsibility becomes fused with identity, decision making become emotionally heavy. Does that make sense? So every decision begins to feel like it carries enormous weight. What if I choose wrong? What if I misunderstand God's direction? What if I damage something important? Like the mind then tries to eliminate uncertainty through analysis. But life rarely offers perfect clarity, which means overthinking becomes a constant attempt to achieve something the human mind cannot fully achieve: complete certainty. Now, some people might say, so should I just stop thinking carefully? Of course not. Wisdom involves reflection, discernment involves thoughtful consideration. But wisdom and rumination are two very different processes. Wisdom evaluates information and eventually moves towards action, while rumination circles endlessly without resolution. And the difference often comes down to where identity is anchored. So, when your sense of self depends heavily on making perfect decision, or thinking becomes pressured, mistakes feel threatening, and uncertainty feels dangerous. But when identity is grounded in something more stable, decision making becomes lighter. Not careless, but lighter. Because your value is not it's not being determined by whether every outcome unfolds perfectly. Does that make sense? And I think this is where the gospel introduces a powerful shift. Your identity is not defined by flawless decision making. It's 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 defined by your relationship with Christ. Okay? That does not remove responsibility, but it removes the pressure to control every possible outcome in order to maintain your worth. And psychologically, that shift can interrupt the overthinking loop because, listen, if your identity is not at risk, uncertainty becomes easier to tolerate. If you find yourself caught in overthinking loops, I want you to pause and ask a few reflective questions. First, ask, what uncertainty am I trying to eliminate right now? Is it uncertainty about the future? Is it how someone perceives you? Or maybe about whether you made the right decision? Then ask yourself another question. What part of my identity feels threatened in this situation? What part of my identity feels threatened if this situation turns out differently than I want? Am I afraid of looking incompetent, being rejected, losing control? Those fears often reveal a deeper driver behind the thinking loop, right? And finally, ask yourself this. If my identity is secure in Christ, what level of uncertainty can I allow without needing to solve everything right now? That's a good question, right? Because many situations in life cannot be resolved through thinking alone. They require time, experience, and trust. So overthinking is rarely just about a personality quirk. It's often the mind's attempt to control uncertainty in order to protect identity. And so when something important about the self feels at risk, the brain often circles through possibilities in an effort to regain stability. But endless analysis rarely produces the certainty it promises, right? Instead, it keeps the mind trapped in these loops. The deeper freedom comes when identity is no longer tied to the perfect outcomes, flawless decisions, and complete control. When your identity is anchored in Christ, uncertainty loses much of its threat. Okay. So you can think carefully, you can seek wisdom, but you no longer need to solve every possible future in order to remain stable. And that's when the mind begins to finally quiet down. Titans aren't born, they're forged.